This video is talking about re-terminating the Pathfinder for the Aries system. When you start, these are the components that you're going to want to have on hand. You want an 11/16 wrench, a 3/4 size wrench, pliers, wire cutters. You're going to want at least one spare soldering head, a razor for cutting. You're also going to want at least one zip tie, surgical pliers. You're going to need, of course, your soldering material along with the soldering gun and the heat gun. You're also going to want a wire strippers and for sure a Phillips screwdriver. I think it's a 0.5 size. And also you're going to want the head for the Aries, the cover for the Aries system. You're going to want some sandpaper to sand down your soldering device. This is of course what we're attaching, so you're going to need a fresh one of these. And you're also going to need a fresh one of these for crimping for the Aries system. Now there may be also need a voltmeter and the covering, the shield for when you're doing the soldering. You also want this piece right here attached to the table. And there may be other components like screws, things of that nature that you'll want this device right here as replacements in case you ruin something on when you're dismantling or putting it back together. I also like to have one of the old devices that has been cut because it went bad, just as an example to help me figure out how to put it all back together. And I think also a trash can. So when you're conducting this work, you'll be tempted to just throw stuff on the floor, and by the end of it, you'll have an absolute disaster. And key to this whole process is keeping the table clean. Obviously, I laid everything out for you so that you could see it all, but we're going to put all this back in its proper spots, and you want to make sure you're keeping the table clean when you're working. That way, if a piece of a screw or a piece of equipment falls on the floor, it's easy to find because your floor is not a disaster. And if you keep your table clean, again, it's easier to find the tools that you're looking to work with. Which brings me to the last point. You want some cleaning material for your hands. If your hands are dirty, it can cause problems when you are conducting the re-termination. So here's the guide to our efforts. This should be part of your inventory before you start. This book is really the master on how to do everything. This page right here is just as important. This is how you test after you're done. You test the electrical current with the voltage meter. If we goof something up and we plug that camera in after a bad re-termination, we could fry the circuit board, which is thousands of dollars to fix. So we will definitely need this paper at the end of the procedure. Okay, the first step in re-termination is preparing to re-terminate. So the first thing we're going to do is dismantle the cable itself. Okay, the first step in dismantling the cable itself, we're going to use our screwdriver. In some cases, you may actually need an Allen wrench to unscrew these screws in here. After those screws are undone, this will come apart. It's important to keep these loose pieces in your magnet box, to include the screws. There should be 4 of them so that you don't lose them. We're going to go ahead and set that off to the side. The next step is to dismantle this. Here's where you will need your 3/4 wrench up here. You will need your 11/16 wrench right here. So once you get it broken, which I've already done, you probably can undo it by hand. So we're going to pull this down here. We're going to go back to our 5/8, or correction, our 11/16 on that little knob sticking out, and our 5/8 on the larger component. And same thing, we're going to counter rotate them to break them loose. Okay, once I got it broke loose, sometimes you got to do it a few turns with the wrench, but more often than not, it will come undone. Okay, so we're going to slide that guy down. If you ever have to take those off or replace the plastic piece, just want to make sure that you put it back in the correct order, because you could potentially put this plastic piece backwards, and that will obviously cause problems and have to redo the whole thing. But in any case, we'll slide that down for later. The next step will be sliding this piece down. When you're operating, the only screw you ever touch is this screw right here. However, to work on the rover, we're going to have to recess these screws enough so that this can slide back. So what I'm going to do is pull these back just a little bit so I can slide it over. Oops, I actually pulled that screw all the way out, which obviously is not good. I'm going to put it back in. I'm a little carried away. Let me put this back in here. I want to lose it. Okay, there we go. Once we got that off, we're going to slide it down. Okay, for the next part, we're going to put this cap on right here. Go back to our 3/4 wrench and slide this. Just loosen this cable. Once we got it loose, in most cases, you're just going to be able to go ahead and unscrew it by hand. Same process. Once it's unscrewed, we go ahead and slide it back. Okay, so here we, and again, like little pieces of trash like this, don't throw them on the ground. Throw them in the garbage can. Keep your workspace clean. Okay, now, finally, the next step is to take off this bracket. Sometimes these brackets are Allen wrenches, but in this case, and more often than not, they are just a regular Phillips screw. This small. So we're going to go ahead and unscrew those. Nope, not quite. Okay, go ahead and take that off. You can see how it comes apart. I'll put it back together. And what we like to do is screw these back in just a little bit. A, to keep this piece together, and B, so that we don't lose these screws. These screws are expensive and you have to special order them, and this could literally stop you from getting your next return done if you don't have some of these in stock. If you use these screws, it's your job to go tell the office manager and ask her to order some more. And all you do is you just bring this little packet in, and they'll have the part number right on it, and she can contact Flexible Pipe and have that packet ordered. Oh, we'll take this and we'll put in our tray so that we don't lose it. Okay, this cover can come off now. So now this crimping part, this is the part that we have to replace every single time. We're just gonna, all right, now that we've removed everything, and again, this is the portion that has to be replaced every time. We're gonna go ahead and cut off the cable. Now, when you took the cable apart, remember this part was right here. You'd wanna cut behind that, because a lot of the damage is going to come from in front of that. They recommend to cut 3 feet back. I think that's a little bit excessive. This cable is very expensive, but in any case, where that metal component was, we'll go at least a foot back from that. So we're looking at 2 to 3 feet back. We're going to go ahead and cut this cable. Cut it as straight as you can, as up and down as you can, and correction here. One thing that you can do to help make the cut a little better is you can go ahead and just get through some of that plastic sheathing before you make your cut. All right, once we get that, then I'll use my cutters here and cut it. So again, we're going to cut about 2 feet back, and I just want to show you that process of how we make the cut. First thing you do is you just get on there and get through that main sheath, because that's the hard part to get through. Once you get through that main sheath, you can see the undercoating is exposed, and you can then slide your cutters in between that plastic, and it's a pretty easy cut at that point. May take a little bit more to get through that cloth underneath. So the first step before conducting your termination is, after you cut the wire, you're going to want to test all of your cables to ensure that you don't have a problem upstream. And this is how it works. We simply cut the wire, and you run the same procedure as after you are done conducting the termination. We're just going to use this sheet right here to know what wires to connect to what. And all we're doing here is, again, validating to make sure that there are no problems upstream of the part where we cut the cable before we go through the work of doing a termination. Okay, the next step of this procedure, page 6 in our diagram book, is we are going to expose this sheathing here. And as you can see, they recommend about 2 inches of exposure. All right, again, they recommend about 2 inches of exposure here. So all we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and mark with our razor. And then the next step is, with that mark, you can see it's got it in there. I'm going to go ahead and create that cut all the way around this device. I think some guys just use the razor itself to do that. Find this kind of effective. Okay, once I've got that cut all the way around this device, the next step is to take and cut down the length. You don't want to go too deep, or you will cut the material underneath. I'm going to go a little bit deeper on that one. Okay, as you can see, I cut around here first, and I cut a length of it. And once you've done that, you should be able to just kind of pull it off. Should come off fairly easily. Okay, there we have our 2 inches. A little less than 2 inches right now. Okay, the next step is to slide on this new piece. If you use this new piece, for getting low, we should have at least 2 in stock. Then go ahead, and if you're using the last one, bring this bag in to the office manager, give her that part number, ask her to contact Flexible Pipe and order. You should always order at least 3 or 4 when you order these. The next point in the structure, we slide this on. You can see they recommend that you keep this material intact. And then you put this next piece on and then cut this material off. Sometimes that can get to be a lot to try to make all that work, but that's what they recommend. Okay, like we said, they recommend slide this piece on and keeping this sheathing underneath. That can be very difficult sometimes. We really haven't had much trouble with just cutting the sheathing off, so that's what I'm going to do next. To cut the sheathing off, what we found is fairly effective. You can slide your razor along here, and again, don't go deep because you don't want to cut what's underneath it. But you just open up the sheathing and you kind of just pick it apart with your hands. Once you've got this material opened up, you can just pull it apart. And now we're just going to take our razor and cut that off as effectively as we can. This is a little bit of a tedious process here. Okay, we've got this sheathing cut off. The next step is to slide this portion on. Make sure that it's facing the correct way. So when we slide it on, we want these little notches to go towards the machine, towards the reel itself. Now, if you're having trouble getting it on, you might have to shave some of this off. Okay, once we get this on, we want it flush with the very end of the cable. Right like that. Once it's flush with the cable, and sometimes to get it flush, you'll actually push it back so you can see everything well, and then slide it forward so it's where you want it. This can be very difficult to get on sometimes. If you ever run into that problem, you might have to cut the cable back a little bit further. But once we get it on, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to crimp it down. Before you crimp it down, remember, make sure that all of these components are upstream. 1, 2, 3, 4, to include this plastic piece. And they're in the right order. If you do this whole re-termination and you forgot to keep these components upstream of the cable, you'll have to cut everything and re-terminate it. All right, so once we've got it where we want it, now we're going to go ahead and crimp it down. We're not smashing this and wrecking the cable on the inside, but we are crimping it so that it does not move. This is what's keeping that rover from falling off when you're reeling it back. So you do want to crimp it enough. And that's why they recommend cutting this cable back 2 to 3 feet to make sure you're working with good cable that's strong when you crimp this down. All right, once you got it crimped down, of course, give it a really good solid tug. Make sure everything is nice and tight. The next step they have you do is put this piece on right here. I don't like to do that before we do the soldering. It just kind of seems to get in the way. So we'll actually move to the soldering step next. Okay, for setting up our soldering station, it's going to be kind of user's preference, but one thing we're confident of is you're going to want this zip tied up top. What that does is it makes it so you don't have to fight the weight of this cable that's hanging down. So you want to slide these guys far enough down so that they're not getting in the way. And then you're going to zip tie this up here, and you'll have to play with this what length that you want everything at. All right, the next step is we're going to go ahead and undo these wires. so that we can work with them more easily. We're going to basically just separating them so we can see each color and access them better. All right, the next step from there is we are going to expose the wires on here. So what seems to work well is you use a more narrow gauge here, and you know, it's about half a thumbnail of exposure. We'll just kind of there we go. If you haven't done this before, if you just kind of go back and forth, you want to cut that plastic without cutting the wire. And then you can just pull it off and you expose them like that. And you're going to do the same for each one of these wires. So as you can see, we're using the 0.32 gauge. Just a couple rotations and then pull it and it comes right off. Trying to make them all about equal. You don't want to be too aggressive, because if you're too aggressive, you can end up pulling some of the wires out with it, and then you don't get as good of a connection when you solder them. All right, the next step is to expose the shield and or the video and the audio wire right here. Okay, so for exposing the video and the shield wire, what I will, or the video and audio wire, I'll make my cut at the base, taking careful not to wreck any of the shield, and then I'll typically just take razor, and again, be better to do 2 cuts rather than 1. And be very shallow so you don't wreck the material that's underneath the shield, the cover. So as you can see, once I get just a little bit slit, I can really work it apart with my hands, and I might need to recut a few areas, but it'll largely just come off like that once I get it cut most of the way. There, peeled right off. Okay, here's the next step in the process. So I goofed up and I accidentally cut this wire right here. Exactly what I was saying to watch out for. I snipped too far with this and cut it. So I thought about removing this from the video, but I thought I would just include it because there's 2 lessons learned. One, I think it's a better use of time to use this razor. Cut very lightly on the sides and then slid all the way up, and then from there you should be able to just slide this shield off. Second lesson is these crimpers here. So as you can see, they're not there. I had to cut the cord off and start over, and I'm kind of going to be stuck here. I'm going to do a little bit more of the video, and you'll just have to ignore the fact that that metal piece is not here. Like I said, I thought about redoing the video so that everything was perfect, but I think this is a good lesson learned. This is why, if you are doing a re-termination and you use a component and there's only one left, you gotta go in and you gotta have it ordered. It's your job. Have a minimum of 2 of every component on the shelf at all times. So if you open this packet up and there's 2 left, you use one of them, and there's only 1 left, go on immediately, either contact Flexible Pipe yourself, send them a picture of the part you're looking for and ask them to order more, or go into the office and ask the office manager to order more. Otherwise, when you need it most, the whole operation is stuck because you don't have a $100 crimping part. Okay, so now the next step is we are actually going to pull that white wire out of this meshing. And I found the most effective way to do that is to kind of push this meshing down and just create a little tiny hole. And you know, you can use something for that or whatever you need. But when you push that meshing down, it's going to create some gaps. And all you need is a big enough hole to slide this wire component out. So that's all we're looking to do. You can also just kind of peel the meshing away and undo it, as it were. But I found that it seems a little bit easier to instead create a little hole so that you can grab this white wire and just slide that white wire out. There we go, and now they're separated. So now we're going to take the shield and keep everything together. And this white wire, we're going to go ahead and expose. Okay, white wire is exposed. These are two, you know, the audio and the tractor and the visual, so they're pretty important wires. Okay, the next step is we're actually going to go to our old cable, and we are going to pull some wires out of here to reuse them. So same process. I just cut a circle around that cable, and I cut vertically along that, and you know, should pull off fairly easy there. Sometimes if you don't cut deep enough, you're gonna have to recut a little bit, but in this case it looks like I cut deep enough. Again, garbage, make sure that goes in the garbage, not on the floor. Okay, and so I don't have to be quite so careful with these. All I'm looking for here is the white. I can just cut all these off, honestly. All I'm looking for is the wire from the inside. So I'll steal some of the white wire, and I will steal some of the black wire. Okay, now that I got some of this wire, we're going to go ahead and expose it, and this will make more sense as we move on. So we're just going to expose both ends of the white wire. And both ends of the black wire. Okay, we're going to go ahead and code the tips of these wires. As you can see at this point, I'm using this brace to kind of free my hands up. And have the soldering material right here in one hand. And you know, I'm not an expert at this, but the bottom line is we want to try to code, get some soldering material on this wire. And then we will also fill up this device with solder material too. The connection is a lot better when it's solder against solder. So, I mean, you're going to have to play with how you do it here, but for me, these actually seem a little bit long. I'm going to trim these down just a little bit so I don't have so much material to work with. Because having these wires too long can cause problems when you're trying to put everything back together. Okay, they're kind of shortened down a little bit, and so now all I'll do is I'll touch the solder to the gun to get it hot, and all I'm trying to do is coat these wires with solder material so that they sit better, or that they adhere easily and quickly to the termination end when that point comes. So sometimes when you're soldering, if you start having problems and it's not soldering well, so make sure you rub down that tip a little bit. Don't just immediately switch to a new tip, because it's otherwise be switching a new tip all the time and wasting a bunch of money. But get some of this soldering material off and go ahead and give it a second shot. Okay, as you can see, we got these soldered. Some of these aren't great, so if you get a big bulb like that right there, that's not going to be terribly useful. So I'm probably going to need to solder this and flatten it down a little bit. This green one right here is a much better job. Nice and smooth. There's some material on there, but it's not so much material like this yellow one, where it will be hard to get it into the connector end, which will make sense in a while. All right, remember these two wires that I took out of the old, the bad cable? Well, now we're actually going to use them. The black is going to get spliced into this shield wire, and the white is going to get spliced onto this white wire. All right, here's the next step. Remember these two wires, free wires that we cut off of the old ones? Well, now we're going to turn them into these two wires right here. So as you can see, we're going to wire them in to the cord, and then on top we're going to have like another coating to cover them up. So they're actually, the black's going to go to this wire, to this shield right here, and the white's going to go to the I think this is the video right here. Okay, so for the black, I have too much here, so I'm going to cut some of that off. There we go. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make sure I code these two wires just like I did everything else with some soldering material. All right, so once I have these wires coated, what I like to do is I put it in here and I wrap the wire around, try to give it maximum contact. Okay, now I've got that wire wrapped around, and now we're going to go ahead, I'm going to clean this off a little bit, we're going to go ahead and solder that wire on there as best as we can. Okay, once I've got it soldered, I just like to give it a little tug, make sure it's nice and secure. Next step will be soldering the white wire to the internal white wire that we had pulled out of that shield, like that. Okay, I kind of like to use the same methodology. I'll grab these two wires, usually one I've cut a little bit longer than the other, and wrap them around. So I've got them wrapped around, and remember they're both soldered already, so they should solder fairly quickly together once I get the soldering practice going. Okay, same practice. Once I have the white one soldered, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that, give it a little tug and make sure it's secure. The next step will be coating these two wires. So basically I'm just looking to take this right here and cover all of this exposed metal. So I look at it and I kind of measure it with my thumb, and then once I've got it measured, then I go ahead and I cut it according to what that measurement was. So I just measure with my thumb about where it should cut. Made a little mark. Cut it with the razor. There, it's ready. I'm gonna slide it on. So this one, I'm actually having a little bit of trouble getting on. So I either need to rework some of my solder, or I need to choose a better and make the solder a little bit flatter. It's got too many bulges sticking up. Or I need to choose a better or wider gauge wire. Okay, you can see I got black covered up. Remember how it was a little bit too wide, and I either needed a wider gauge wire or I needed to flatten the solder. What I chose to do is actually re-solder it and flatten that solder a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing for the white wire. Same concept. Gonna cut it to the right length and then slide it down on this wire and cover up all of that soldering. I think I might have the same problem here. I might need to flatten some of the soldering. Well, it looks like it's gonna fit over it. So obviously the better you are at soldering, the easier this is. I'm not great at it. Okay, so we covered that wire. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn on our air gun. All this is just a heat material that will shrink down this wrap that we just put on. You don't want to go too much because then you'll wreck the wires. Okay, once we got that heat down, now we're actually going to get a larger gauge wire to put it over the top. And again, that's why I like to have an old one with, just to kind of remind me how all that works. You can see they did exactly what we just got done, but then they put another one on top to try to kind of hold those two together. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and match them. I'm going to measure out where exactly I want it cut. We'll slide it down in these two wires. There we go, and I will go ahead and shrink that one just a little bit. There we go. Okay, you can see that's done. Okay, now we're ready for the next step. In the next step, what we're doing is we're preparing this device, the connector. So it's already actually prepared, but I'm going to show you just one more time what was happening here. So all we're doing, and when you do this part, you want to make sure your needle is really clean, so it heats up as efficiently as possible. I'll go ahead and clean it real quick. So what we'll do is we'll take this piece and set it in, we'll set it inside the little cup there. And then what I'll do is I'll take the soldering gun. This is why you want a good tip for this one. But we'll press right on it, and it will heat up. And once it heats off, you'll be able to just kind of take it off. It kind of like cuts itself off. Okay? And so what we want when we're all said and done is each of those metal fillings is filled up with soldering material. And that will make it easier, because we've already coated the wire with solder material also. That will make it easier to set the wire in there. So the next step of the process will be to actually, I'm going to use this as spare wire so that you can see what I'm talking about. This isn't the actual one, but it will have been coated in solder material, and we're going to set it in there, and then we will set the soldering gun right on top of it, and it will, as soon as it heats up, it's connected. Okay, the next step is to solder the wires into the actual bracket. Okay, so reminder, what we've done is in this bracket we have filled these with solder already, and at the end of the wires we've coated them with solder. That way it's solder on solder. And the idea is that we will take our soldering gun, heat up this one of the brackets, and simultaneously hold the wire in there, so that as it heats up, it melts, you see a little puff of steam, you let go, and it's soldered. The overarching process is you're going to want to make sure that you have one of the soldering, or one of the sleeves, over the wire upstream before you actually solder it into the bracket. A lot of this is user preference. I like to use these two, kind of pinch them together so I'm not holding things. You can see this wire is held up here. You can move it around however you want. But really it just comes down to how you see best and how you work best. You can always want to move your lighting around to try to get the best lighting possible, so you can see what you're doing. Okay, picking up where we left off. Remember I had this is where I goofed up before. I have this on here now. So now we're basically going to solder wires from here to the connector. You can see how I have it set up. It's kind of user's preference here. I got my soldering gun, and I use these to kind of stabilize everything, and I have this tied up top so that cable's not hanging down. I'm going to end up using this sheet right here. So as you can see, it describes to you what, you can look at this diagram if you're having a hard time seeing the pen. You can see we have D and then E here. Now I've already completed E, which is connected to orange, and I've completed D, which is connected to black. I like to solder starting on the bottom, because then when I'm setting my soldering gun down on top, I don't run into wires above me. So I'll work my way from bottom to top. And so we have orange for E. Orange for E, and you can see black, and there's two blacks. We're not doing the shield black right now. We're doing the regular black. Regular black goes to D. So that you can see on a blank one, I have done E. See, E's right there, and I've done D. Okay, so my next step is, I think I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do F next. That will be the easiest one, I believe. So I'll look over here, and I'll see F is, and I go across, is green. So I'm going to be doing this green wire next. Okay, we finish orange, green, and black. Orange, green, and black. And now I'm going to move up to working my way up this right here, which is C. So I'm going back to my diagram. I see C. I go across and I see it's red. So I'm going to solder the red wire for C right now. And sometimes if I'm having a hard time seeing in there, I'll just grab a fresh one so that I can see what's going on. And you can see I did E, I did D, and I've also done F for green, but now we're going to go after this guy, C. And C is red. Okay, so first thing I do is I look at it, I see what size it is. It's one of the smaller ones, so I'm going to pick a smaller shield. That shield is too small. I'm going to go up one more size. That shield size will work. I measure it out to make sure I'm going to cover all of the wire, because remember, we don't want any exposed wire. That's why we're putting these shields on. It's also why I solder from the bottom up, because I don't want to accidentally burn wires. So I'll put that on. So this doesn't have a lot of solder in it, but we're going to try it anyway. Get it where I want it, and this is going to be a tricky one. So I'm actually going to change up my grip a little bit. Like that, I get it set in there. I'll take my soldering gun. See if I can heat it up. I didn't see smoke, but I smelt it. So I'm gonna let it dry, see if I had a good set. Not good enough. I might need to add some solder on this guy. He doesn't have a lot of solder in him. I think I might have got it that time. Let me let it dry for a moment. Okay, I'm gonna give it a little tug. Yep, feels pretty good. Got a good set there. So now I'm going to slide the cover down, give it one more tug, make sure it's set. Yep, set good. All right, I'm going to move over to L now, this center one right here. Okay, we got that guy soldered. I actually changed out my tip on the last one. These are some tips that came with the gun, and they don't seem very good. They've only been lasting me a couple of wires each. Maybe I need to do a better job of cleaning it off. The way I work that is if something doesn't seem to be soldering well, I'll just set my tip on some solder, just regular solder, and see how quick it melts it. If it doesn't melt it really quick, then you clean it off and you might have to change your tip. I don't know if these tips are any good that came with the gun. In any case, let that dry, gave it a little tug. Seemed to have a pretty good connection. I'll let it go and slide the shield down into place. Blue can be hard because blue has a bigger base than other ones. Okay, next I'm going to try to go after this one right here, which I believe is M. I'll check my diagram. M is yellow. And just to make sure I'm looking at it correctly, I'll look here. I'll pull up a fresh one. Yep, that looks like M. All right, I'm all set to try to solder M. Oh, my wire came undone. Pinch that down. All right, let's see if that took. Let it dry for a second, give it a little tug. Nice and sturdy. Okay, now I'll slide down that shield. I don't want to slide that shield down too early because the metal is still hot. It'll melt your shield. Then you'll have to start all over again. I hope that's not what I just did. Okay, yep, shield works. Got it all the way down. All right, next I'm gonna go for, I believe it's K. Let's make sure. I'll look at a fresh one. I always work my way from bottom to top. This guy right here. Yep, K, B, A, H, J. So we're going for K. Pull up my diagram and I look at K is white. Not the shield, the other white. Remember, we have this white, that's the shield. We're going for this white. Okay, we're going to try to do K next. Be careful not to burn your other wires. You can be so focused on the one you're soldering and not see that you're resting up against another wire and ruin it. Then you have to start all over. Let it dry. Good seed, but that solder might be too fat. So I'm going to try and see if I can slide. Get my tip off really quick so that metal's not sitting on there. I'm going to see if I can slide my shield down or if I left too much soldering material around. It should be cooled, so now I'll try sliding my shield down. If it does fit, it's going to be hard to get over. Oh, it actually fit barely. If it didn't, I would just have to melt it down and resolder it again. All right, now you can see we're gonna go after this middle guy next. Okay, everything is together now. The last step is to use this heat gun right here to melt all of the shields down so that they stay in place and they seal properly. You don't want to do it for too long. Just enough to see them squeeze around the wires. If you do too long, you could ruin the wires themselves. So kind of do it at the base and at the top. Look down in there, make sure you don't have any wires arced. Okay, the next step is to put everything back together. Just kind of going in reverse the way we took it apart. So we'll start with this device right here. Here it is. The little screws have got to come out. They're tricky, so of course make sure that you catch them in the pan. Leave them in the pan. If you set them anywhere else, they're liable to fall out and go who knows where. They're very hard to find, but if you kept your floor clean, they shouldn't be that hard to find. So I look at the diagram every time. I just set it right on there. Sure it's lined up the correct way. And drop my screws in there. The screwdriver does have a magnet on the tip of it, so that can help you if you're having trouble getting them in there. You put it on your screwdriver like that. Slide in that way. Usually you do one side and then the opposite side. Get them all in before you tighten it down, and you tighten it down opposite sides in the same way you tighten the tire down, like stars, like in a star pattern. Okay, I've got all four in there. Now I'm going to tighten this down. You want this plenty tight because this is what's keeping it from falling off the cable. But you also don't want to strip them, because if you strip this, it's going to be very hard to get it off, and we don't want to buy more than these we have to. They're, like with everything at flexible pipe, they're very expensive. Okay. Again, taking care not to strip the screws, but also making sure it's plenty tight. Okay, I got that part on, and I was just following my book. Okay, next part, we're going to slide our components back upstream. Now, if you remember, emphasize making sure that before you started anything, you have all of your components upstream of the cable. If you don't, you would realize it about right now, and you'd have to start everything over again. Okay, so the first step is getting these wires in here. Now, this is definitely a dangerous part, because if you aren't able to get these in, and this is why you don't want wires that are too long, ultimately you can end up having to redo everything. This is a point when you could undo some of your solders, and then you would have to start all over. So we slide it in there, and now we're trying to twist those cables so that they fit in there. I'm going to go off screen for a minute just so I can get a better angle at this, and I'll come back on screen and show you what's happening. Okay, so I fit them all in there, and now the trick is don't twist the cable itself, because that's how you'll undo your solder. You just twist this part that spins. Oh, I don't have it set in there quite right yet. You know, you're going to have to force a little bit, but obviously you don't want to force it too much, or you'll wreck those cables in there. Okay, so I finally got the seat, and now again I'm only twisting the metal part. That way I don't twist the cables that I've just soldered in there. Once I get it hand tight, take this cover, the cover fits on here. I'll tighten a little bit more like that. Okay, once I've got that tight, then I'll go into my common toolbox. And I will use my 5A, not the 5/8, which one is it? Is it the 3/4? Yep, the 3/4. This back on here. Give it one more good tighten. Yep, it's nice and snug. Okay, the next step is I slide this in here. There we go, fits snug. And sometimes you'll have to replace that white cap. More often than not, you'll be able to put it all back together without replacing that white cap, but you would have had to have already replaced it, because if you notice right now that the cap isn't good, you'd have to undo all your work and do all the solder back over again. All right, so before I actually put that one on, I'm going to screw this one in. Okay, so we'll go back to our 3/4 wrench right here. And then we will take our 11/16 wrench right here. We go ahead and kind of counter tighten them. Okay, those two guys are tight. Now I can go ahead and slide the last piece up right here. Doesn't go in easy over this plastic piece. Now I've put this plastic piece on backwards before. Had to redo it. I've forgotten to put these upstream before and had to redo it, and so I got to pay attention to that first part of the video. Make sure you've got everything in order. This is put my 5/8 back on. Go back with my 11/16 on this side. I tighten them down by hand. Now we're tightening them down with the wrenches. I think this is the part that keeps it watertight. So the instructions say to put Loctite on here. Sean doesn't do that, and never has, he says, and we haven't had problems with it. But if you do, it's this stuff right here. Okay, so that's back together. Last part, again, sliding it from upstream. So Sean said, 1 minute here, I gotta find the right Allen wrench size. No, don't have the right one yet, hang on. All right, it's the last Allen wrench I had. So we only mess with this on one here. So what we'll do is we'll for these we'll mess with these a little bit. There we go. See how it slid in right there? Just drop that guy a little bit lower. That way he doesn't come undone. Tighten all these guys just so that they're popping in there. And then the on one. This one that Sean uses. So you can see that we tighten these just in there enough so that they're flush, so that this doesn't come undone. But yet we don't want them so flush. We don't want them so far in that they don't seat with that rubber piece. So kind of pull that piece up, make sure the rubber piece can be accessed and exposed. But they're far enough in where this isn't sliding on and off. We want that rubber piece to be able to set in. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I still have some work to do, but I just want to point out, listen, when you're done, wipe the shelf down, use those, wipe it down, keep it clean, put everything back, Aries box, soldering box, commonly used tools, spare tools, and Envirosite box, okay? Keep the space nice and neat. I just dropped a bolt and or a tiny screw. The only reason I was able to find it is because our floor is decently clean and our table is clean. So wipe everything out before you go. Take your trash box with you and throw it away. All right, our next step is to use a multimeter in this form right here to test the connections and make sure that everything's good. Need to do this before you plug it in, or you risk ruining something. So here's the basic procedures. I'll look at this form. I'll look on the right side here, and that represents this. And then I will also look right here. I'll just kind of set the light up behind me. And I'll use my multimeter. I'll turn my multimeter right here. I can connect my ends to make sure I'm getting a sound. Okay. And so for the first one, I'm going to take my cable. This might be a little tricky without someone holding the camera. I'll do my best. But I'm going to take my cable. I'm going to look first at the top one. I'm doing A to A. So I start over here, A, and here I find A. I see A in there. So I'm going to put my reader right on A. And now I need to go to A to the other side. Okay, find A in there. It's the top left one. All right, and I'll put it in there. Now, this is the only one that you're not going to get a beat from, but you will get a reading. And it really should be 67 or higher. That's a pretty good reading right there at 75. It depends how long the cable is. There is math on the sheet to tell you how high the reading should be. But now we'll go down the list, and now I'm going to go over here. This is B to B. Same procedure. I find B on the connector. Got it on B. And now I find B on the main point here. I'll put it in B. Hear the beep? Got a beep. All right, I'm going to go down the line and do that for each of these. What you have. Okay, we're done with that re-termination. Make sure that you hang on to these sheets. Put everything back where it belongs. This goes in the aries stuff. Can't stress the testing it enough, right? Test it, because if we put that cable in and you haven't tested it and you have two wires arced or crossed, we could wreck the camera, the circuit in there, and we're looking at $5 to $10 grand to get that fixed. So yeah, make sure that's done. Once you get the camera done, go ahead, roll everything up, set it out there. And remember, the procedure is, if you've just had a return done, before you leave to go to the job site, you set everything up in the shop, turn the camera on and make sure that everything works. Though we've tested it with a multimeter, there still could be a problem. We don't want you to drive all the way to the job site and find out that the reterm actually wasn't good. Last part. When you leave, make sure everything is turned off. We've left these guns on before and actually wrecked them because they were on for so dang long. And furthermore, it's obviously a fire risk. So make sure you click the light off. That'll kill all the power to all the systems there. And then you can go ahead and be done. Thank you.